Anoop, welcome to the Sunseeker podcast. It is really an honor to speak with you and to have you on the podcast. This is a wellness consciousness expansion podcast, and I thought that there would be like no better guest to kind of shed some light and some wisdom on some of the topics that I'm trying to touch upon, and I think that you're touching upon in your work. So I just wanted to start off with the initial question of just like what your life was like before and after your NDLE experience.
Before, I have to kind of try to remember, to be honest. Before, I think I was always looking for something. I think I never quite felt settled. Frankly, I think like everybody on this planet. And was trying to find out what that is, I think we naturally move towards kind of discovery and healing without even knowing it. For me, there was a conscious aspect of it too, because my family was into that stuff growing up. So I was, I guess you could say, experimenting with mind. I was thinking about those things. I knew what I was interested in, what I was not interested in, so all that was there. And afterwards, it depends on what phase you talk about. Immediately afterwards, it was okay. And then soon after, when I started my training in emergency medicine, it became very difficult to handle everything that was happening. And kind of, it's almost like when you're in the mountains or the forest, you're okay. But when you have to be in the city with the trauma and the violence and all that stuff, it's not. And it was kind of like that. Not that I was in the mountains, but I was still kind of just living my own life, kind of coasting towards the end of medical school and things like that. But once it became real in training, then it became very difficult for, I think the first 6 months to a year, something in that was really difficult. And then really probably a 10 to 12 year period after that was a lot of integrating. And it's still going on now. It's still happening. It's just now there's some level of equilibrium or, I guess like know-how of how things are working to manage the process.
Yeah, and if you could just speak a little bit what the experience was like for you.
Yeah. I think so. One of the reasons I came on is because your podcast is called Sunseeker. And that was my experience was of the sun, literally. And it's funny, even this, where I'm sitting now to do podcasts and stuff like that, I have this circular carpet that's basically like the sun. It's like the color of the sun, and I'm
That's
sitting
great.
right in the middle of it, similar to the painting behind you, like kind of that orange, a brilliant orange. There's something about it just feels really nice. The short story is I was in my room. This was during medical school. I'd come back for a break at my parents' house, and I was in my room, and I was reading a book. And as I was reading this book, quite unexpectedly, it felt like a bomb went off, like in my body and in the room, and like everything disappeared. And there I was sitting in the sun. So the room wasn't there, the body wasn't there. There was really no thought process. It was just like what I would call full frontal. It's like you're just like immersed, you know, in brilliance and perfection. And after some period, it's almost like I drank enough. I was like, oh, like I'm good, and just felt like, okay, I'm done. It's like, yeah, good. And I was moving on, and I knew that if I took another step, that there was no going back, that it was all done. And just and it was irresistible, because in a way it was what I had always wanted. It was all the discomfort or the restlessness that I had experienced had all resolved now, and I realized. But then, just as that was going to, let's say, complete, then this being of light stepped forth from the sun and intimated that this wouldn't be fair. It was almost like, just pause and think about this, before you do this. Almost like that. It wasn't words, but that was the kind of feeling. Just it wouldn't be fair, and it was true, and that gave me pause, and then everything kind of re-imploded, and before I knew it, there I was again in the room, sitting, um, uh, and everything was different at that point. It I still don't think I was with the body yet. So I could see the body. I could see my body sitting there, and it was like I could see it from all angles, and I could see that everything was constructed from light. I could see that space was made out of light. That the walls, that my body, that the thoughts that I would have, or could have, or have had, or would have, were all just like made of this. They're modifications of this stuff, of this light. Uh, And then I think I kind of cruised. I describe it as cruising. You know how toddlers cruise? They like run and hold on to one thing, and then they run and hold on to the other thing as they're learning
Yeah.
to walk. I feel like it was kind of like that, where I was just kind of not really stumbling, but that's just kind of what it feels like. And went to the bathroom and looked and didn't really recognize this body. I remember that. And yeah, that was it. That was the initial experience. And then, the processes of integration, everything that happened after that.
Wow. Yeah. So for me personally, in 2014, I still remember the date, December 14th, 2014. I had a similar type of experience where it was like an outer body experience. I saw my body. I was completely freaked out. I, went to my home, and then I saw this light that was similar to what you were saying, where it was just like this white, bright light. And it was almost like infinite intelligence. And it's like, but it had that feeling of, oh my god, like I'm seeing all this too soon. And at the time I was 18, and I was like, I wanted to like spend time with my family and my parents. Like, I feel like I was like led into a door that I wasn't supposed to be in, and I was trying to like run back, and I like was just like running back into my body and that whole thing. And then so for me at that point, it kind of is like the beginning of this whole journey for me personally, because like I went back to school immediately, and it was really hard to integrate into school. Like to drink alcohol, to do anything would just be like kind of like blips. I'd be like thrown back into this whole situation. And it's kind of led me to the spiritual path of like now I'm part of a Shakti yoga school. And this all kind of gives me context and ability to understand, I guess, from like with certain archetypes, what I was experiencing. But when I was experiencing it, I had absolutely no context. And I was just like, I felt very othered, and I felt like very, like if I would explain it to someone, they would be like, oh, like they just couldn't relate. It was like I was speaking a completely different language. And I
Yeah.
think what really is interesting about, your whole story and journey is that you have experienced something similar, but you're also in the hard science community. And so how do you take your experience and like one, how do you like how have you integrated that into your practice, like through medical school and through kind of like your work? And then also, how do you kind of have the language to speak about this if you do with peers or others in that space?
Yeah. Well, I kind of had to create a language. It was a very conscious decision to to find a way to communicate. There was a lot of work put into communicating. You know, I would say things, and very few people had any understanding of what I was saying, including my parents, who've like been steeped in this stuff for decades. You know, they've been studying the stuff or meditating and doing things, um, and I guess I decided that I didn't want to. It may sound strange, but I didn't want to be like a spiritual person. Like I don't believe in something called spirituality. Like you know, I just feel like there's only life, and I depending on how much of it you see, you call it different things. You know what I mean? And I didn't. I had no interest, and I didn't see myself as like a quote unquote spiritual person. Um, Nor do I see myself as a scientist, and I'm. It's all logic and all. You know, like I don't care too much for either of those categories. I value them. I use them both. I identify with them also, but not mostly. You know, like I don't identify mostly with any one of these. Like they're all kind of useful as the way I see it. Um, and so I said, okay, then I kind of have to. I felt like I had to have my own language for it. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but that's the way I felt. I didn't want to just use spiritual terms, classic terms. I didn't just want to use hard science terms. So I just try to be descriptive, and that's how I came up with the three minds, and like, you know, different views of this reality. Whatever we're experiencing can be seen radically differently depending on how we use our attention and how we see ourselves. And you know, I would submit that we don't see the world as it is, which even scientifically we know. Our eyes see such a narrow band of wavelengths of light, you know. So the majority of what's here we're not seeing through our eyes. We can access it, but it's not through the eyes, through the physical eyes. So I had to come up with that kind of language, and it took a long time. First, it was the three minds, which I still use. I find it very useful, but even that is rather subtle. And so, like, I feel like I had to step it down in many ways. So then I came up with something called mind body flow theory, and now I talk about pneumocore, which are the four engines of nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. This is kind of a way that everybody can start to access what we're talking about. You know, there are certain things that balance the human system, and they're universal. And it just so happens that the things that balance the human system are the things that reverse disease, prevent disease, you know, improve, let's say, mindfulness, help a person feel well, help a person feel integrated, better relationships, advancing human potential, spirituality, enlightenment. It's all the same thing. That's one thing that I feel is not said enough. It's the same things that give you all of this stuff. It's not like a pill for this and then another pill for this and then another practice for this. And then, of course, there are customizations. We all do different things, but the same general things involving nutrition, movement, connection, and rest work across all categories of life. So once I saw that, I saw this very simple way to speak about it, depending on who I'm speaking with. You know, so in the healthcare context, in the science context, we can talk about disease and diagnosis, and we can talk about the fact that, you know, so many diseases and diagnoses we don't actually cure. We just kind of manage it and manage it and manage it and manage it forever. You know, we don't cure it. Well, what? How would you cure that? Right? Well, pneumocore, nutrition, movement, connection, rest. You know, so that gave me kind of this conceptual and this word map, and a place where people felt safe. If you start talking about the three minds and the second mind, and the world is of the nature of consciousness and things, that we're just like, well, what is this? You know, a lot of people. So then you say, well, look, even something as simple as disease, we're not getting to the root cause. Why? Because we're not addressing these factors. And when you address these factors, then your mind starts to change, your body starts to change, and you actually see yourself differently, right? And that's kind of an entree into another level of conversation. So that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining all of that. You know, it sounds like a very balanced way, and it's also like people from any space or walk of life can kind of like digest and understand what you've just said without having to have had some, crazy, experience. And it kind of, I think, is really helpful for, the next generation as well. Kind of like simplified language is important because people can really get lost in all of the kind of like the sensationalism of, different spiritual practices or different, gurus and things and such. So I think that that's pretty like astounding. So you are like the co-founder, CEO of Health Revolution, and you're speaking about the four energies. And so you've also written a number of books. And can you talk about like the process of when you're writing Is This a Dream?
Did you say that, talk about the process
Yeah, the
of
process,
writing it?
yeah, and kind of the,
Yeah.
what drove you to write.
So that was the second book I wrote. And I think that was when I was putting down a lot of the clarity that was coming. I was writing it on a website in a forum of in blog posts, and I was getting a lot of questions, and then I would reply, and there was this kind of Q&A happening over and over. And I think at some point it became clear that there were certain fundamental questions that happened over and over and over. Just like I feel like it's like 10, maybe 10ish kind of questions. And I feel like if these 10 things are cleared up, it's just another world of clarity that happens. Um, so I decided to organize all of that, really. I never set out to write a book, but I saw all of the stuff there. I saw the questions coming. I said, okay, let me make it into a book. So I went back and selected the ones that I thought were the most important and put them in a certain order, and then saw a couple things missing. So I wrote a couple things in between. And that's how that book came about. So it's kind of a Q&A, I think, of the chapters are like questions, and it's meant to just stimulate reflection on some of these common questions that come up in the process of that mind opening up.
It's great. And to take you back a little bit to the ER type of space, so you've had this NDLE experience, and you've worked on all of these ways to kind of like simplify and explain, all of this language. So how do you kind of practice this within, after the experience, like with working? How did that develop for you, your own practice and process to deal with what you experienced, and how to kind of balance that through your life?
I think with patients, it's mostly it's it when you're in the room with them, it's how are you in the room, and can you see what's happening with them? I'm not talking about like psychic insight into what the diagnosis is or anything, but can you just see what's happening with them in that moment, like why they're really there, what's going on, the true diagnosis, not the biomedical diagnosis, but what's actually happening. um, and then can you connect that with the biomedical diagnosis? Because I'm an emergency doctor, that's what I practice. I don't practice any other kind of medicine in the ER. I'm not trying to do something on the side or anything like that. I'm bread and butter emergency medicine. But I still see what I see. So can I bridge what I see with the biomedical process and the biomedical diagnosis? Can you bring these together and address that? Um, and you can always do that to some extent, but how much can you really address that within a system that doesn't have many of the same assumptions about the human being, like what a human being is, right? We codify our understanding of what a human being is in our model of anatomy, which is strictly physical. And so like all your diagnoses are physical, right? Even so-called mental health is really, the way we understand it, is brain and neurotransmitters, not really fundamentally as mind and experience. So it's really about trying to bridge those two in my vision. And then usually at the end, when you make a diagnosis, if there's an opportunity, you can talk about nutrition, movement, connection, and rest, and say, look, hey, yes, you're doing this, you're having the surgery, or you're taking this medication. Here's what actually solves the root problem. Nutrition, movement, connection, rest. I don't talk about all four, but maybe choose one that seems applicable in that moment for this person and talk about that. So it's very simple, and I really believe that the process is simple, actually. It's just that there's so much misdirection in society, and so much unnecessary complexity around it that makes it seem like difficult or impossible. So I try to choose the simple things and talk about that.
That's great. Um, so you stated that the biggest emergency is that we've forgotten who we are and we don't know what this world is. Can you speak to that a little
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah, I think as long as the bigger picture of who we are, why we're here, what this world is, isn't there, there is some restlessness in the system. And I think sometimes you don't know it if you have these goals that are very close, right? Like, I want to get this done or get this job or have this salary or this relationship or this whatever it is. And when you have like these goals, they keep you moving in that direction. You might not be aware of what the real goal is that you're moving towards, what you really want, and why you want A, B, C, and D, right? That are all leading to Z in a sense, right? So, and I think if we're not aware of at least some context, I don't think there's something as like complete full context, but as long as we're not aware of some sufficient degree of context, I think there can be a lot of misdirection. So I want A, B, and C because I think it's what I want, but as soon as I get it, I realize, oh, okay, what's next? Like, that's not really what I wanted, right? And I think that's a process of trial and error. That's a process of progression that I think is okay if we're aware that that's how it's working. That's how things work. Is like you get that, and then you move on, and the next thing. But if you don't know, it's like pinballs. You can be going in all kinds of directions without that greater context of who you are. So, and it can cause suffering because you don't actually know what you're looking for through all of these things. Whereas if you realize the bigger picture, you realize, okay, these are all kind of stepping stones. It's not really about this, but these are stepping stones. This is just part of my journey. These are milestones in my journey. I think that can alleviate a lot of suffering. There is a bigger picture to this journey. All of this isn't the entirety of what I am. So that's what I mean by, and I even say that if we don't have sufficient context for that, or of what we are, what this world is, that in a sense is what leads to emergencies down the line that we see, the gunshot wounds and the heart attacks and all these things that happen down the line, is because of some of the steps in this journey that are not informed by this bigger picture. Now, that doesn't mean that all problems go away, that there's going to be no disease in the world, because disease is also part of the journey, right? It's not that happiness is the only thing in life. Like, there is a journey, right? There is topography to the journey. But when you have that greater context, it changes everything. One thing I always say is that if I think that I am my pinky, then when I get a big cut on my pinky, I will just be devastated because it's a mortal wound, right? I'm like, I'm going to die. This is whatever happens. This must not happen. This can't be happening. I'm just consumed because this is what I am and it's injured and that's it. But if I know I'm the whole body and I get an injury to my pinky, yeah, still not fun, still sucks. I wish it weren't there. I try to address it, but it's not going to consume me. It's not going to devastate me, right? There's much more health and healing that I'm experiencing because I know what I am. That's the only reason. I know what I am. And so the suffering is manifold less, 90%, 95%, 99% less, even though it's still not fun. So that's where it becomes important to see what this world actually is and to see what we are, because then the journey of life, the joys and the sorrows, are within a much greater context.
Yeah, so I guess a question that I have for you, just with my own work, is I'm also in recovery when it comes to, and so when I speak to a lot of young people, I'm 27, they really have like a desire and a hunger for, I feel like, balance and wellness and, seeking out these sort of conversations. So, like, any advice or, I don't know, solutions? Like, I think that the work that you're doing really is like what people at my age are seeking, but might not know that they're seeking, or might not know that this is what they want. So through your work, I guess, how do we bridge that gap between, age and all these other kind of like limiting factors to really, help a lot of people that are suffering?
So I'll take a long approach to your answer because I think it's important. Um, I just, before this, I just Googled, before I came on here, what is the health industry, right? Just to see what Google would say. And I was actually shocked because even though I've been in this and I know this, to see it from Google, it surprised me. It said it came up with the big thing was like, what is the healthcare industry? It's this medical device manufacturing and pharma and all this stuff. And then it said healthcare industry is this, what is healthcare, this, that. It kind of shocked me that the phrase health industry was not coming up. It was healthcare industry. It automatically translated health industry into healthcare industry. And I've been saying that for the long time, as we don't know what health is. We use these
Yeah.
words. I mean, it's many words actually, not just this, but especially this word health. It's thrown around like crazy. Healthcare, this, so many companies have the word health in their names, like United Health, Healthcare Corporation or whatever it is. And I don't think we know what it is, which is why, I mean, you can Google the most obscure thing and it'll be there on Google, right? It's like the public consciousness.
Yeah.
But such a common, plain, vanilla word like health and health industry, you type it in, and it's like it has a brain fart. It has a stroke. It's like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to healthcare, right? It's just mind-boggling to see the level of ignorance, and I would say even the fear that we have of what health actually is, that we have to divert to healthcare and divert to wellness, right? There's a wellness industry for sure. There's a healthcare industry for sure, but there's no health industry. It's mind-boggling. And so health comes from the word heal, which comes from the word whole. It's to be whole. And surely we don't know as a society, in our public awareness, what wholeness means. What does wholeness mean in our day-to-day life as a student, as a professional, as a podcaster, as somebody in the public eye, as a politician, whatever it is? What does wholeness mean? And so I think what has happened is that this word health is something that younger people generally don't even think about, because it's understood as disease or no disease. It's understood as diagnosis or no diagnosis. So, like, most teenagers aren't interested in health. Why? Because they don't feel like something is wrong, right? And I'm not saying there is something wrong, but that is because of the narrow understanding of what health is. I think health is human potential. That's what health is. Health is the horizon of human potential. It's not an end game. It's not an arrival. You never reach the horizon. Healing is the process of moving towards the horizon. And all of us are healing. Every single one of us is moving towards this horizon. There's nobody who says, well, here I am, health. I am done. It's all done. I've reached the limits of human. Like, it's like saying I've reached the end of the internet. I've seen it all. It's like, no, you haven't, right? There's always more. So health is that horizon that we're always moving towards. And healing is really the destination, meaning healing is the process that we're all involved in. And as long as we're healing, we're good. That's the place to be, is in that process. And that's what I think, that's how we need to frame it so young people understand, right? Because a lot of the framing and language in society is about industry. It's about selling. It's about marketing. right? So I always think it's strange that we have the healthcare industry, right? Why isn't just the health industry? Why isn't health industry enough? Why did it have to be healthcare? We don't call it the auto care industry. We don't call it the energy care industry, right? We don't call it the housing care industry. It's just housing. We know what housing is. It's just auto industry. We know what autos are. But it's not the health industry because we don't know what health is. So it's like we make it health care. Well, I do care about it. I don't really know what it is, but we care about it, you know? That's
Yeah.
the way it kind of comes across. And so I think I would love for young people to hear that, be like, hey guys, like nobody really knows what health is. All the experts, they don't know, you know? Whether it's the doctors, whether it's the executives, whether it's the public health officials, I don't think we know what health is. I don't buy it, you know. And so it's for the young people to figure this out. Like this is your territory, this is your land, man. Like make it your own, you know. Figure out what it is, and show us. Teach the adults, you know, because you haven't bought into all the marketing and the language yet. You know, another big one is mental health. I just don't buy it. I don't buy mental health and mental illness. I don't think we know what the mind is. Mental health is health of the mind, but we don't know what health is and we don't know what mind is. So what in the world are we talking about? You know, it's just like it's this gibberish that we repeat and parrot without knowing what we're talking about. And then we buy into all of these frameworks for how to think about it and what to do. I think it's a lot of nonsense. And I think young people are attuned to it because they haven't been in that for so long. You know, once you start developing a career and things like that, you become dependent on these words and these phrases and this kind of groupthink, you know, for your career. But as a young person, you're free. That's the time to think about it, involve, and make health your own, and realize that it's about your own potential. It's about what you can do. And again, in a simple way, the way to start is Pneumocore: nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. I'm not going to, it's a whole elaboration, but you know, you can go to the website, healthrevolution.org, and go to the blog, and I elaborate on the whole thing. But I think I love young people because they don't buy the BS.
That's definitely a refreshing answer, and thank you so much. If you could also just plug in anywhere else that everybody can find you, that'd be great. I really appreciate this conversation. I've learned a lot and definitely just enjoyed your energy and presence. So thanks so much. If you want to plug in everything, people can find you,
Yeah,
definitely check out. Yeah.
absolutely. So we have a 28-day jumpstart course that activates each of these four engines of Pneumocore: nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. So it's 1 week each spent on each of these, 7 days on nutrition, then movement, then connection and rest. And this is across the body and mind. So nutrition is of the mind and the body. Movement is of emotions, thoughts. Movement is of the breath. Movement is, of course, of the body. You know, connection with self, connection with others, connection with the planet, which is the biggest biohack. It's one of the most amazing things you can do that helps anybody. And rest. Rest as sleep, but rest as also resting the mind while awake. And we go into each of these. It's like a short 5 to 10 minute video daily and a practice that you can do on your own. And most people don't do all of these practices because if you did these practices, you would be transformed in 28 days. Your family wouldn't recognize you anymore. They say, who is this person? So you don't have to do all of them, but even if you do a couple consistently, it will change your life. It will change how you experience yourself. So you can check that out. It's at healthrevolution.org/28 days, 28 days. And then just in general, engage. You can send us comments through the website, the contact form. We are working, just so you know, we are working on creating an ecosystem for health that organizes the entire world of health and wellness. Because the whole thing, healthcare and wellness, the industries are so, I think, especially healthcare, there's a lot of misaligned incentives. And wellness, it's fantastic, but it's nebulous and it's not organized. And so people don't really know how to navigate it. So what we are going to do is organize the entire healthcare and wellness industries by Pneumocore: nutrition, movement, connection, and rest, and bring some clarity to this so people can heal at scale. Everything we do at Health Revolution is about scale. There are tons of people doing great work. What I want to do is bring all of that together and make this like the real health system. Not a healthcare system, not a health-ish system, not a kind of health system, but an actual health creation system. So check us out at healthrevolution.org.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Wow, that's simply just incredible. Thank you, Anoop, so much for your time, and have a great one.
Thanks, Christian.